All right, that was a background report leading us to our conversation on electoral process in the past 25 years of our unbroken democracy. We have a number of guests lined up for this conversation, but right now let's welcome Ezenwa Nwagu, who is Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reform and convener, Say No Campaign Nigeria. He's joining us live here in the studio. Mr. Nwagu, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Nwagu. And we also have from our... Oh, okay. Okay. We'll have more of them as we make progress. Claire.
Okay, I mean, this is a familiar terrain for you. Since 1999, we have had about 5, our electoral act has gone through changes about 5 different times. We had the first one, of course, in 2001, 2006, 2010, 2015, not 2015, and 2022. The last one was 2022. That's the Electoral Act 2022. Just take us down memory lane, on what led to some of these changes and, if you may, evolution in the Electoral Act.
Well, thank you, Claire, and happy birthday. It's, I think the Electoral Act has a reputation of being perhaps the most amended piece of legislation that we have had in the return to civil rule. And that's because of the desire for, if you like, incremental progress. The legislature virtually did the 2002 amendment single-handedly. And because of that, INEC had issues with some of the resolutions that came and the amendment that they did, and indeed were in court. And that led to the further amendment. And all of this has arisen from the need to have free, fair, acceptable, credible elections and inclusive elections. So when the law or the legal regime that upholds our leadership recruitment process does not take care of these indices, the indices of fairness, the indices of credibility, the indices of inclusivity, acceptability, you need to continue to tweak the law. And that's just the explanation, because it's not just the desire to change, it's the yearnings, the aspirations of Nigerians for more improved, better elections are the reason why those amendments. We were coming from where you'll be voting, and sometimes the result of where you are voting will be announced. That's where we're coming from. We're coming from a place of temporary voters card or no voters card at all, and then the chaos that occasioned brought us to the smart card reader and the permanent voters card. And as your opener said, the smart card reader was not recognized by the law. The Supreme Court dealt a death knell on the smart card reader. And so that needed tweaking. So the introduction of technology need to be captured in the law. So that's eventually why the 2022 amendment now began to think about those indices that I talked about. First is about money, funding, that INEC can now begin to get his resources 1 year to every election, unlike what it used to be before, where even, 1 year to election, they are cap in hand begging. Now, operationalization of that is another issue. Then the issue of inclusivity, you started talking about, that INEC will now have to compulsorily provide assistive materials for people living with disabilities. what it used to be was that it's optional. They could decide to or not. Now they are mandated by law to provide assistive materials. That means magnifying glasses for people living with albinism, braille ballots for those who can use it, and all of those. All those are taking care of the inclusivity component, making voting places accessible, separating the aged and the vulnerable and pregnant women from all of those things are just looking at the law with the lens of inclusivity. Then technology, of course, INEC can now, if you have a community reading of the law, INEC can determine whatever technology it wants to deploy. And so you have the BVAS, you have the IREV, you have IVED. All of those, IVED is the one that is used for voter registration, BVAS is the one that is for authentication, and then IREV is the upload. You know, the one that is used to upload to the viewing portal. You know, so it's, for me, the need for inclusivity, the need for credibility, the need for acceptability and fairness are the reasons why we have made the kind of progress that we have seen in our electoral process. And the joy of it is that it is called a process because it's indeterminate in terms of its it will continue. We will continue to make those changes. That's why it's a process.
But having seen, I like the fact that you have tried to, you know, take us step by step in this what we call incremental progress. Having seen all of this, where we are coming from, where we are, I'm sure you also have a sense of where we need to be. So would you say that the cup is half full or half empty?
Well, for me, I've always thought in terms of, you know, whatever sociological situation that you are in compels you to want to improve, compels you to want to get better. And I don't know anywhere where, even where they call the whole idea of advanced, whether people is an advanced country or a developing country, is still a conjecture within developmental literature. But the fact is that there is room for improvement. And first is we need to, technology is very good, but I've argued and will continue to argue that we need to be nuanced because of the challenges of our own environment, teledensity, internet penetration, level of education, and all of those challenges. But we need to remove all the legal, legislative encumbrances on our way to deploying technology and ensuring that we can get into electronic, you know, voting where we can do so. I think that is important. And the test of the bimodal is that we can try. We'll continue to infuse it and test, but we must remove all the legal complexities around whether we should go for electronic voting or not. That's where we need to go to. People should be able to vote without necessarily leaving their comfort zone, and that will be important. You know, that's one way. We need to remove the perennial logistical fiasco that our elections are by first and foremost ensuring that, yes, we have made the law that the EMB can get its money 1 year, but we do know that red tapeism and bureaucratic bottlenecks is part of the challenge that we have. Whether those monies are released 1 year before, nobody will tell you, but it manifests itself in those logistical challenges that you also see. Because if those monies were released on time, some of those issues will not be there. Then there are attitudinal issues. For the political class, their candidates and the politicians, there is not enough engagement with them in terms of reform, in terms of shift from what they've always wanted elections to be to where we actually want to be. And that's perhaps for me the bigger elephant in the room. That's where conversations are not holding. If we are discussing the electoral process, our engagement will be INEC, but the political class, in terms of what they do, their behavior or misbehavior, internal party democracy, the issue of violence, thuggery, all of those issues that diminish us as a people is not an INEC issue. There are other players in the stakeholder pyramid that needs to come into conversations like this in terms of where we have to be. And so what do we do? How do we get the political class? How do we get the governing class also to eschew impunity, to take away the inherited military disposition to issues, to politics, to power, to civil conduct? We are not there, and that's where we need to be. We also
let me just allow you to take a breather. I'm just wondering, because the reason why we political analysts still describe our democratic process as nascent, it's because the electoral process that throws up the political class is still fraught with the same challenges, if you may, that the electoral amendments in the electoral processes were supposed to have addressed even since 1999. So if we look at the items that you've raised, the reasons why these amendments have been conducted, let's take, for instance, inclusion. Do you think that the amendments have really addressed the issue of inclusion, or to what extent do you think inclusion has been addressed?
So, I think that we have moved from nascent. Nobody talks about nascent anymore. It used to be used as a ploy to shut up people from making demands on the process. So once you make that demand, they say, oh, it's just a nascent. We are no longer nascent. We've transformed. We are moving into transitioning into democracy properly, and so I don't like that nascent thing, because I understand but having said that, you see, if you say inclusion, for instance, you want to talk about women participation in
youth participation,
people living with
disabilities,
with the vulnerable groups and all that. But if you say in terms of electoral politics, you would want to ask whose responsibility would that be. So, for instance, INEC does not field candidates. You give INEC your candidates. That's what our law says. So there are political parties who have responsibility to field candidates. So if they field all men, if the parties field all men, INEC has under the current law, has no power to say, please go and change it, include women. So advocacy has to be on the political parties to create either affirmative positions in terms of quota for women. We can make that as a law, that political parties can give us 40% of their candidates to be women, however they are able to do that. So when you now come to the secondary election, which is the one INEC conducts, the people can have a choice to vote a man or a woman. So the contest for power is actually within the political party space. And there is not enough, in my view, honest view, there is not enough advocacy for the political parties. The laws also, because you have a male-dominated legislature, for instance, sometimes the advocacy, the pressure that needs to bear to make laws, inclusive laws that see politics from the lens of inclusivity, is also facing some challenges. You know what the gender bills have suffered it ought not to be so. So we in X-raying 25 years of this leaping that we're doing, we need to now begin to say who has to do what. because that's not the conversation. Most times we model everything up and say, oh, INEC did not field women. INEC does not field candidates. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but I'm not sure people are saying INEC because that's clear. That's crystal clear that INEC doesn't field.
Oh, Victor, it's clear to you. If you go outside, you'll be shocked by the level of misunderstanding of some of these simple, what you call simple issue. Is just like you saying NEPA. You are saying NEPA because you are used to it. So now it's a business. Somebody has responsibility to give you, but you still say you are still holding some other person responsible other than the person you have business transaction with. So it's the same mindset. A lot of people don't know who does what. And that advocacy, because of that lack of understanding of these issues, the advocacy to pressure, to put the point. Who goes to the National Assembly? Who are those? The politicians.
But the electoral law that makes it possible, that pegs the age limits, for participation in election, for presidency, for House of Reps and all of that, also is another, it's another angle to trigger inclusivity. But we discuss, what you have is that is not even respected, or is it?
So the law,
yes.
that's why I talk about the law. You see, you can have a law, but what about the attitude? Okay? You have a law, and that law was a product of struggle. It was not a giving. Even at that, it is still not, it was tokenistic, if you ask me. The Senate retained his own age. He didn't reduce anything. He reduced for others, but never reduced the contest for his own position. So that itself that shows you the mindset. You understand? If you are going to remove barriers, you remove those barriers. If you are going to take away barriers, you take away barriers. So having taken away the barriers, it is now the responsibility of the category itself to bond together and struggle for power in a political party, because the only vehicle for leadership recruitment that we know in our country is the political parties. So if you are a young person, the law has already empowered you, but you don't become because you are young. You become because you go to the parties, you go to the political parties, you become activists in the party, you are recognized, and you are supported. So it is not enough that you are a woman, okay? A woman does not become because you are a woman. You become because you will go to a party, and in that party, you will either grow there, or struggle there, or get imposed there, whatever it is that they do within the political party to become. So the assumption that once the law says this, that is what will happen, is not so. You can buy foodstuff. You can have foodstuff in your house and die of hunger, because you still have to come and prepare the food and have the patience to wait it through to get done before you can eat.
So in terms of quality and quantity, from your perspective, if you were to evaluate all the amendments, the Electoral Acts, and input into our democratic system, how would you, what would be your evaluation?
Let's take the one you just talked about, the constitutional amendment that reduced the age for contesting election. Is celebrated all over the world. For Nigeria, with our gerontocratic approach to everything, ageism and the rest of it, and we were able to take that out of our constitution and reduce the age for contesting election. We can continue to pump chest around that for a long time. That's what you call the not too young to run.
Yes. Yes.
So which is celebrated today that Nigeria was able to do that. So even if we want to be uncharitable to ourselves, we should be able to agree that was some very important thing. But there is nothing that comes in most places, not even in the US, for women to vote, it was a protest. For unpropertied black people to vote, they didn't just give you. For even white that doesn't have property to vote, it was a problem. So the struggle for expansion of the democratic space is not a walk in the park. It's not a tea party. So what needs to happen is that we need to consolidate civil rule and make sure that it continues, and don't allow people to constrict the space, those who have gone in to constrict the space, but to see how much we can expand. The Scandinavian countries are reducing the age for voting to 15, 14. They are not hung up on 18 like we have done. I mean, but if you bring that idea here, but the same people who will challenge it cannot own the television in their houses. They are 14-year-old or 15-year-old that operates all the gadgets in their homes. But they will challenge you that no, don't
all right.
don't go there.
Let's put you on pause for now. I understand that Oluwole Osaze Uzi, who is Attorney General of Edo State and former Director of Legal Services at INEC, is now through to us. Good morning to you. Can you hear me, Mr. Osaze Uzi?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. If there was a question asked.
Now, I'm welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria. I know that many people will still remember you for your time at the INEC. And so let me just put to you a question I put to Ezenwa Nwagu a little earlier. We are celebrating 25 years of unbroken democracy, and we are taking a look at the electoral process in particular today. And I just wanted to ask, as someone who was in that process at the INEC, would you say that, taking cognizance of where we are coming from, where we are at the moment and where we need to be, would you say that the cup is half full or half empty?
I'm not so sure I will use the word that we are celebrating. I don't know whether we should be celebrating or not. Yes, it's been 25 years of unbroken democratic rule. That's how it ought to be. We should be celebrating the 64th years of unbroken democratic rule as far as I'm concerned. But each time in the past that we started down that journey, it's been truncated 3-4 times. So that's the first point. But again, it depends on your perspective, whether it's half empty or half full. The fact that we are still here 25 years later, certainly it's a work in progress. Certainly, as Ezenwa says, it shouldn't be nascent, really. There's been some progress. Unfortunately, there's been some regression at the same time. But after 25 years, a child that was born 25 years ago is now considered an adult in all ramifications and can run for most offices in the land. So it can make laws for us. So I think that we should be conscious of the fact that democracy is not an end in itself. We have to keep working, and elections are the entry point to democracy. There must be periodic elections for there to be any democratic dispensation. So that is the starting point. Are elections better off 25 years later? I don't know. The jury is out. I think people can, each person has his own opinion about that. But yes, it's been unbroken, so that's a positive, and we have to keep working. Some of us feel that we should be better off by now. There are many things that we are doing now that we should not be talking about. Some basic things like logistics challenges, like the attitude of the political class, like ballot snatching and the dishonesty and the irregularities. Some of those irregularities that we are still encountering 25 years later are not things we should be encountering. And don't forget, the democracy did not start 25 years ago in this country. It started more than before independence started, actually. We gained full independence in 1960, but there have always been elections from 1921, 1950, 54. There have been elections. And so we should have some level of perfection now that we have had a quarter of a century of unbroken elections and unbroken democratic civilian rule.
Mr. Uzi, thank you. I'll just quickly. I'll return to you in just a second. But let me welcome Faith Nwadishi, Executive Director, Center for Transparency Advocacy. She just walked in to the studio. Thank you very much, Faith, for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So Mr. Uzi, again, I want to take you up, and that's because many of us still remember you more as a very good ambassador for INEC, and that's why you were party to a number of the reforms, of the amendments in the Electoral Act. And I'm just going to ask you to just give us your view, an overview of what you think about the quality of some of the, reforms that we brought to bear in our Electoral Act in the past 25 years. If we could just take, the major ones and tell us, evaluate the quality.
Thank you for your kind words. There have been so many, I really don't know what to start from. The program this short, you cannot even highlight the most important ones. But I think the most difficult one, let me start with the most challenging ones, is that we as a people don't seem to have changed much. You can have a perfect legal regime, but if the operators are not dedicated, if you're not committed, if you're not Democrats, then I'm sorry, you will not have a good, robust democracy. You will not have good elections if the operators of the system don't believe in the system. And sad to say, a lot of our people is this winner at all costs, this determination to get to power, let me get to power, everything else is secondary. I think that has been our greatest challenge as a nation. But anybody who's observed elections in the last 25 years will know the marked differences and improvements that have come in the process itself. Chief amongst, I guess, is the introduction of technology. That technology ought to be a game changer. Sadly, it has played that important role. Doubts and some doubts were cast in view of the presidential election of 2023, but otherwise, it's so incredible. In 1998, 99, I recall that people will register 200 times. People can go about carrying 100, 200, 300 cards, and election time distribute these cards to people who are not qualified to use them. People could vote anyhow. People used to write results. People still attempt, sad to say, some operators still attempt to do some of those things. But with technology has helped us in terms of identification of those who are eligible to vote. So if you don't have a smart card reader and a smart card, that's the PVC, then you will not be able to vote. And that PVC, the important thing about the PVC is the built-in chips that can identify, and the biometrics captured in the PVC allows us to electronically identify those who are entitled to vote. So incrementally, we've gone there, we went to the card reader, we went to the beavers, and their improvements are coming in both in terms of registration, entitlement to votes, and in terms of the actual voting itself. Some people say maybe we should go towards electronic voting, but we cannot go to electronic voting overnight. We have to lay those foundations. So incrementally since 1998, when the elections were held, and 99 when the presidential was held, we've gone and seen this incremental improvements. The laws have changed. Prior to now, commissioners in INEC ought to be card-carrying members, because the provision of the Constitution said that you must be qualified to be a national commissioner, you must be qualified to contest election as a member of the House of Representatives. And part of that chief in that qualification is the fact that you belong to a political party and you're sponsored by that political party. So that nebulous provision has been removed. Now you're required not to be a card-carrying member. Recall that a special advisor to the past president on social media was actually nominated, but because of that amendment in the Constitution, it was dropped. There was a general as well who had contested elections, I believe in Niger State, who was nominated as well, but his name never got to the Senate because they saw that this ran afoul of the current position of the Constitution. So these are the kind of improvements that have come. They're too numerous, but these are some of the highlights in the improvement. But as I said, we ought to change the mindsets of those of us who are involved. Without that, no matter what the perfect law is, you will not have good democracy and good elections.
Thank you very much, Oluwale Osaze-Ozie, for your contributions so far. We'll get right back to you in a moment. But let me engage Faith Nwadishi here. We've talked a lot about how far we have come in 25 years. And, well, everybody agrees, or so it seems, that we should celebrate the much that we have been able to achieve. But let me take you up on what is left to make it perfect. There's no perfect system anywhere, but we can get closer to perfection. So what are the missing links, in your opinion, to make our electoral process what it should be?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning again, Nigerians. Thank you for having me here. One of the missing link, and a very vital missing link we have, is the attitude of the political class. Because for any electoral process to work, you have the laws, you have the EMBs, you have the voters, and you have everybody that would have to do one or two things along that electoral value chain, including security, of course. But you see that along the value chain, all the stakeholders and the roles that are playing are making efforts to make things better. But the people who benefit from the entire work that we all put together to have this electoral process are not making any effort. Rather, when you look at processes that lead to the election that now involves every Nigerian, because before the election we go out to vote, the political parties need to have their own elections that they call primary elections. So look at what happens in primary elections. Political parties have constitutions that they never follow. They never follow it. So it's not about the democracy itself. It's about going back to the olden days and how they do things. So within the political party, we need to see that sincerity of purpose for these reforms to happen. Then you look at the security agencies itself. You have a situation where you are on field and something is happening, and you get there's a constitution that empowers a security agent to arrest anybody that is found within a crime scene or is seen to be perpetrating some kind of criminality. And you go to the election, you see somebody flouting the Electoral Act itself, flouting the constitution, and carrying out acts of criminality. And the security officer says, I have to wait until the INEC official says this is a crime before you can do something. So we need to look at the political class and the security agencies to ensure that everybody understands that it's a collective responsibility to make our electoral processes work. And this is what the problem has been the last 25 years.
I want us to also look at, one sour point in the whole of our electoral process, and that's the issue of, campaign financing, and and all the registration, all the issues that involve money. I know that sometimes, I don't know which of the electoral acts now, maybe the one of maybe 2006, I'm not so sure, that dealt with that put a ceiling on the amounts that could be used during campaigns. But so far I don't know, you want to speak on that, whether that reform is working? Is it working?
In fact, the present electoral act that we are implementing now talks
the
about this. Yes, talks about its ceiling and even increase it. So that all the complaints of the political class to say, oh, Nigeria is such a big country. As a presidential candidate, you need to do campaigns. You need to go to the 36 states, including the FCT, making it 37. And so that ceiling was raised up a little bit. But you see, the political class again come back to argue that money is not even enough. So you have a situation whereby the political class sits down and determines what their campaign finance should be. And again, that issue around, supporting, giving donations to political parties, the Electoral Act has also been able to define that and look at what is the maximum that you can give. In the past, you used to have, big companies, CEOs go to parties, they call it fundraising programs, and they give at will. Now, you don't see that happening. I can say we see that decreasing, but it's not addressing the issue of political campaign financing. Because what you now see is that rather than put money for proper campaign financing, just like voter education, ensuring that citizens know how to vote so that you don't get voided votes. In fact, the responsibility of doing that is not just for civil society, but for the politicians who benefit from that process. They need to vote money, but what do they vote money for? They do a donor basket vote to buy votes. So that when it is time for campaigning, you just go do the form fair, print t-shirts, and then you keep money to buy votes. And then you see somebody selling votes or buying votes on election day. And the security agent say, oh, I don't know if that is a crime unless INEC official that is busy conducting the election tells me that is a crime, when there's a law that has already said when you see criminality, arrest it and address it immediately. So this is really a very big challenge, and definitely the issue of political party financing has become an issue that everyone should look at, and we are actually looking at it very closely.
Yes, as when you want to weigh in on this, because the essence of that was to address the kind of financial frauds, and of course reduce the monetization of the whole process, which is the reason why our politics is called money politics. I mean, it is a zero game. The winner takes it all.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. Improvements throws up. Every success has its sour grapes that it throws up. As you tighten the noose around corruption, electoral corruption, especially internally within the electoral management body, it manifests in what then happens outside. The power of the voter has increased, which was not what it used to be. So the voter has more say now. So before now, like Barrister Uzi said, you could just get an INEC official to help you do the results. People don't need to vote. In fact, some unscrupulous INEC officials hawk ballots and results, which they still try to do now, And then, but now, vote buying is a consequence of the power of the voter increasing. So you now have to go to the polling unit to give the voter money to vote for you, because if he doesn't vote for you at the polling unit level, you have lost. There is nothing anybody INEC can do for you anymore. In today's electoral process, the electoral management body is an onlooker, in quotes. The power has gone to the voter, so you now see vote buying. So what do we do to respond to vote buying is something that is is work that we are still doing. Now, for campaign financing that Faith had talked so eloquently about, what we are contending with is not the law, it's impunity.
Okay.
And I often say this, it has nothing to, it's just that if I flout this law, what will happen?
Yeah, so there's no enforcement.
So
no one is,
no, that's what I'm saying. It's not just for election. It's an attitude that we carry everywhere, that nothing will happen. Look at this. Once consequence came on the spraying of the Naira note, go to parties now, everybody is, people now say, okay, at least they are responding to the consequence management that we saw for that. So now the actors in the political space, the politicians themselves, they know this law. There is a breach even in 2023. You go and take money from foreign donations.
Yes.
What does the law say? The law says you can't spend that money. That you have to bring the money and domicile it with INEC. The money that you took from outside, they know. It's not as if they don't know. They collect the money, they spend it, they even address a press conference.
So whose responsibility to prosecute?
That's the point that Faith made. The Police Act says that the police should enforce all laws. It didn't say what kind of law the police should enforce. But what has happened is that we have made a Christmas Day law and a Salah Day law out of electoral laws. So crimes committed during election are special crimes that need INEC to prosecute. INEC will be the one to prosecute it. So the police will come together and hand over case files to INEC. And INEC will in turn prosecute. So,
please be clear. Let's get you clearly now on this Christmas and Salah laws. These are not laws that are enshrined in the Electoral Act or in the Constitution.
No, what I'm saying is that murder. If somebody is killed on election day, I don't know that it has been taken out of. It's no longer murder. It is a electoral offense. Murder is murder on
whether any day.
So why should the police specialize crimes that are committed
On election day.
On election day. That's my point. And from our comfort zone, we are advocating the setting up of electoral offences.
But do they really know that the onus is on them, really?
No, it's part of the game that is part of the game that is being played. So the police will tell you that INEC did not fund us. INEC does not fund any police for elections. Mm-hmm. It is the National Security Advisor that all of them submit their election expenses to. INEC only provides stipends to policemen who are working, because their own people will be eating on election day. They cannot starve those who support them. So they give them stipend of 1,000 naira. But when you see them address the press for their own incompetence, what do they say? They tell you, they push the blame. Now, for prosecution, what do? They say, oh, the Electoral Act does not put the onus on us. INEC is to prosecute. But this contention needs to be cleared. That there is no... even though we are trying to specialize crimes committed on the electoral day, the existing laws already have taken care of thuggery, have taken care of voter inducement, treating. They are all constitutionally determined issues, whether the penal or what do you call it? What's the other code now? So, but the challenge for us is that we have made a fetish of elections in a way that has put it to look like if I commit a crime during election, I have to be treated specially. So somebody wields dangerous weapons and the person is arrested. Immediately after election, the person is released. Let us do a census, a count of crimes committed during election and see the level of prosecution.
Okay.
So all I was talking about is impunity. Campaign finance is not a challenge of the law. It is more a challenge of what Claire talked about, which is the determination for consequence management in that area, which doesn't happen.
All right. Thank you very much, Ezenwa. Let me quickly get back to our Benin studio where Oluwole Osaze-Ozie is. I'm sure you've listened carefully to the contributions of those of them, our guests that are here in the studio. But I want to take you up on specifics. That doesn't mean you can't weigh in on Ezenwa's last contribution, for instance, but I want to take you up on specifics, for instance. Why has it been difficult, in spite of how much it's been talked about, the ability for politicians to switch political parties? You could be one party this morning, and in the evening, you are another party. Is it that unimportant? Why has INEC, for instance, not found it one of the amendments to push in our incremental progress in our electoral process?
Well, thank you. If you listen carefully to what Ezenwa has analyzed and Faith has said as well, Faith emphasized the point that all stakeholders have a role to play in this process. And so when you say, why hasn't INEC done this? You have not taken heed of what has been said. It's an all-stakeholder affair. So INEC can lead in certain ways, but also stakeholders, CSO, media, everybody can push for this, can actually push for this. I'm not too sure INEC is the one should be in the forefront of asking for reform, dealing with issues not to deal directly with elections. Its mandate is to conduct elections. Crossing over is a post-election issue. So, in one sense, INEC can say it doesn't really concern us. The crossing over happens after you have been elected. And I think Ezenwa is in a better position to speak about this. I'm just a humble lawyer. But I would say it's partly because of the issues of a lack of ideology in the political parties. There certainly is not much in terms, if you look at the constitution and the manifestos of most of the political parties, there isn't too much to choose. Some of the parties are breakaway from other parties, and some are mergers of converging political parties converging into one political party. So, and then again, you have the constitution. 99 constitution only penalizes legislators who cross over. Only for legislators. It doesn't talk to it doesn't speak of the executive, and for whatever reason, the politicians and we have not pushed hard enough, civil society, media, others that are not government have not pushed hard enough, that maybe when you cross the political divide, then you should be, you lose your seat, or there should be a by-election or whatever else. Now, don't forget that some people say that I won because of my popularity, not necessarily because of my party. But the Constitution says you must belong to a political party and be sponsored by that political party. There are conflicting conclusions in this regard. For example, in Amechi's case, he said the votes belong to the political parties. That's why Amechi was substituted for Mehia, because in the eyes of the law, Rotimi Amechi was elected governor of the PDP in River State, even though it was Celestino Mehia's name that was on that. And we've continued to follow that. So some people say, look, there's no agreement as to what should happen when you cross over. So people say, if you cross over, since the votes belong to the party should be allowed to nominate somebody else to take that position, because the votes belong to the party. Others argue that no. Conduct a by-election, or you lose your seat and conduct a by-election. So there's no certainty as to what the outcome should be if you say that people should lose their positions or lose their seats if they cross over. But talking about campaign finance, and you asked me, I could wait in that. The structure, the legal regime is also a little bit faulty. First of all, there's no science to fixing the amounts that are fixed in that law. We know how much of devaluation there has been in the Naira in the last 6 months, for example, last 6 months, 1 year. So the figures put there may not actually be realistic. In many countries, these are regulated by rules made by the Electoral Commission or the commission in charge of campaign finance. So you don't fix a certain amount in the law. And then the problem with the law is that it only deals with money spent by candidates from the date notice of election is given to the election day. It doesn't talk about money spent by political parties. So there are issues there that I think we still can and should examine the law dealing with campaign finance. But the law is one thing, enforcement is another. In a cash-based society such as ours, how do we monitor expenditure? It's a challenge. So even if you have a perfect law, you'll have the challenge of monitoring it. And the apparatus for such monitoring is a bit difficult to come by. And that is why INEC, for example, is partnering with agencies such as the ICPC and the EFCC, who have better tools towards doing. But still, there is a challenge, and there's so many candidates contesting elections, such the wherewithal to actually monitor campaign finance is still lacking in the country. These are some of the issues.
Thank you very much, Oluwole Osaze-Ozie. We will continue this conversation just after the break. All right, thank you very much for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. We've been discussing 25 years of unbroken democracy with focus on the electoral process. And our guests are still very much with us. But I would like to quickly, Oluwole Osaze-Ozie passed a certain buck to you. He said you will be in the best position to comment on why it is not, in the conversations as much as it should, the issue of, defective morning, one party, evening, another. And this is no exaggeration, it happened. You had one party today and the following morning you had another party. Why is this not being talked about as much as it should be?
I think
but the law is there.
I think the Attorney General is just patronizing. He has he's qualified,
eminently qualified. I agree.
But just take it that the Dr. Donye Okupe said that what this thing is a vote catching machine. It's a special purpose vehicle. So the politicians have defined the political parties as special purpose vehicles to power. So they don't invest in political party building. And it has a history. And the history is when in 1999, President Obasanjo ambushed the political party structure of the ruling party then and appropriated it to himself and made himself leader of the political party, converting party meetings to the villa, summoning everybody. The governors took cue and became leaders of the party in their states, and their wives became leaders of the
women.
And so the growth of political party administration and structure was stultified. It needs to be understood from that point. And so those who took over from the president then never made any change to allow for first career in the political party. You can't make a career in There are people who work in the Republican Party. That's their life.
That's their life. Yeah.
They don't do they work in the. But here there is no such. You can't make a career because funding of the political party is also from the state. The state funds the party. In spite of everything that you see, you can take a history of the political parties. When Alhaji Tahiru Bafarawa was in DPP was strong, very strong. DPP was immediately he left the party, DPP died. When the former governor of Ondo State was in Labour Party, as at that time, Mimiko, Labour Party became, so it is state funding the party and not, so the party should be instructing those in government. But because of the transactional relationship that exists between the parties and their officials in government, the respect, the capacity to control is no longer there. So that does not take away the issue of ideology that you mentioned. Yeah. But then what is ideology? Because many times we also make a fetish of ideology, as if people say we have to be corrupt, it can be the ideology. Yes, it can be, share the money. We can share. It can be the ideology. So because we give a feeling that lack of ideology means that we don't know their position on housing. We don't know. Go and check their manifesto. They have positions on all these issues, but it goes beyond that. How do they see this thing? In 2022, people left, presidential candidates left a party. 4 months later, became a presidential candidate of another political party. We all clapped. So we didn't find anything wrong with that. We felt okay. So we want to go to the National Assembly where the legislator, the one who makes the law, cannot make a law that encumbers him. Okay, he knows that he can leave the party anytime. He only inserted a clause there that if there is crisis. So what do you mean by crisis? You just go to the party meeting, slap somebody, there is crisis in the party, and then you leave. So it's the tragedy of the conversation about fluidity of movements in the political party is because those who make the law themselves benefit from the
scenario. But again, it should also be noted, like you have rightly observed, that there is a constitutional provision for defection, and there is a clause. You lose your seat if there is no your party is not involved in any crisis, and you move. But if your party is in one crisis or the other, irrespective of how the crisis started or what is the scale, so there is that provision in the Constitution, and I think it was effected. It was in River State. In River State, that was called.
The conversation is still ongoing.
No, it's in the court. It's in the court. But that's why I said the AG understands this. The layman's interpretation is simple. If there is crisis, so is there crisis? Who determines? And Victor now talked about it. Who determines what is crisis? So you sit down, cause the crisis in whatever way you define it, and then
crisis enough?
Such bogus terms, so
the challenge is impunity. We have sworn to impunity, and if we are going to make any changes, the first most important thing, and three of us agree on that, there's a triumvirate agreement on that, is that the political class. But we can give them some credit too, because some of the shifts that we have seen in terms of legal regime too is as a result of the actions of the politicians, because those of them in the legislature, who came under a lot of pressure from civil society and the media to make some of those shifts. So we need to continue. The demand side needs to be stronger, needs to push much harder, so that people can be statesmanly. In lawmaking and all of that, so that they don't hold to their side all the time. they can begin to think more of making laws that are create level playing ground for everybody. Because at the end of the day, even when you make law that you think you benefit from, it can work against you.
Faith, let's talk about the issues of credibility.
I think you would like to get Oluwole Osaze-Ozie, who is leaving us in a few minutes.
Okay, let's Mr. Saza, I want you to also weigh in on this, and that's looking at the issue of fairness, the indices of fairness, credibility, acceptability of the whole electoral process, which you had talked about, the introduction or the facilitation of technology, has brought to bear. But I'm really, wondering if that has really given the electorate, the voter, the kind of voice, given the scenario and all the agitations that played out in the last election and all the court issues and issues about IREV and BVAB and all that, has that provision really worked to the advantage of us, of the democratic system?
When you strip it to its barest minimum, what is democracy? What is an election, a fair election? It's basically where people can go out, cast their votes, and their votes will count. That basically it is. It doesn't matter whether you do it by drawing of straws, whether you do it by cutting paper and just writing somebody's name down, or whatever else it is. Unfortunately, we live in a very sophisticated society, and a society where trust is a bit deficient, probably through historical reasons or for whatever reason. Trust is deficient. People have to see a transparent process. You have to shed light on it. And yes, trust was shaken, badly shaken, with the outcome of the transmission of results. I think the process itself, people were fairly satisfied with the actual voting in most places, apart from maybe places like Port Harcourt, Lagos, and a few other places where there was a voter suppression, where people were prevented. Apart from that, I think in most other places, there was a relatively fair process of the casting of the vote. The real dispute, if I recall correctly, was more or less the fact that the result transmitted did not reflect the actual votes of the people in many areas, and they couldn't tell. So transparency is very, very important. Technology has helped a great deal in this regard. The challenge before the commission now, the challenge before the electoral process is the rebuilding of that trust which was badly eroded in the last election. And with Edo and Ondo coming up, I think this is an opportunity for us to rebuild that trust in the process. Because if that trust is not there, then no other index of fairness will be taken into consideration by the electorate. If I go out to vote, will my vote count? It's as basic and as simple as that. I think if the votes counted and people felt that, look, my candidate did not win because he was not the most popular, people will shrug their shoulders, accept it. Any government or any candidate emerging successful from that is not likely to have that credibility crisis as we saw with this government, especially presidential candidates, successful presidential candidate at the end of the day. That's been, maybe people are forgetting, maybe people are going to look. We have to get people back on the ballot, back into voting and saying, look, your votes will count. That is the biggest challenge facing us, and the voter is still king and ought to be king, because it is the voter who crowns, who makes successful candidates. And if they're not satisfied after the period that is 4 years in most offices, if they're not satisfied, then they have a chance to either do a referendum and say we are happy with you, or we're not satisfied with you, and send you out and bring the next most popular person. Not necessarily they will be better, but at least the next most popular, the next most acceptable person. People are interested in who they voted for, their votes being reflective, their leaders being reflective of who they voted for. That basically is it.
Oluwole Osaze-Ozie, Attorney General of Edo State and former Director of Legal Services at the Independent National Electoral Commission, would like to thank you very much for your contribution on the program this morning. We understand that you have to be somewhere else at this time, and we just have to let you go. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Right, and moving on, you would like to weigh in on Mr. Osaze-Ozie's last contributions?
Yes, he was Director of Voter Education. It's not legal.
Okay, not legal, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are things that he threw up which I think will not continue to let go. The ballots, the votes counted in 2023. And the reason to say so is because, like we say, there is a process. The accreditation process and voting process, we didn't have any issue with it in 2023, to the best of my knowledge. By data that is available in public space, the beavers performed creditably 98% in the places where it was deployed. And my contention is that 98% is a pass mark. And we were coming from somewhere where we talked about what the beavers itself does. It has eliminated theft, voter identification theft. So you have states with high voter turnout like Kano, Lagos, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, and Oyo, for instance, not being able to throw in those big numbers that we used to see in time past. That is what the beavers successfully did. And then the voting itself. Voting takes place at the polling unit. If you lose, and we have told you that power has returned to the voter. That's why you are here having what? Vote buying. Voting took place. Results were announced at the polling unit. What do you call it? Results were given to party agents and security at the polling unit. The upload is to a viewing portal. It is not a collection portal. It is a viewing portal. So if you lost at the polling unit, you cannot win at the viewing portal. If you did not have party agents to get your result from the polling unit, the viewing portal will not help you.
But what happens when you have a figure that's not corresponding between the
now,
one you
if you have a figure, Claire, if you have a figure that is not corresponding, it is not civil society or media that raises that. It is the party agent. The party agent at the polling unit is the one who has responsibility to say, this result that I have, we go to collate manually at the ward. You go to the ward to collate manually. When you get to that place, you come with this result that you have, and then collation is going on. And then they write for the polling unit where you did, they write 104 instead of 4. It is not me and Faith that will say it is 04 at the polling unit. If this party agent does not raise any complaint, you do not go to the portal. I don't know if I'm making sense here. Yeah. So the responsibility again is to the party agents. And we have given excuses for the political parties who were not able to deploy party agents for the 2023 election and raise their issues at the polling units. Now the law says that if you do not upload, INEC official does not upload that result, he can go to jail. But people don't go to jail because they want them to go to jail. People go to jail because there is a complaint. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. Yes. So who will make that complaint? The party agent. The party agent will say, in my polling unit, this INEC official refused to upload the result. What is the relationship of the party agent and his party in Nigeria? Transactional relationship. So once election finishes, the guy takes the result they gave him and go to his house. We are talking about INEC viewing portal. Do you have APC viewing portal? Did you have PDP viewing portal? Did you have Labour Party viewing portal? What was the problem in us putting a viewing portal? And let me tell you, the simple explanation for this, Victor, is you went to write exam, an objective exam. The script is marked at the place where you wrote the exam. Your result is given to you.
Hard copy
of the result where you wrote the exam is handed over to you at the center where you wrote the exam. But the law says this your result should be put in a place where everybody can see this result in 10 years' time. the man who has this result does not have his own place where he keeps his result. He's talking about another person, and we are helping them to do so. Which is what I keep telling you, that our attitude is to give comfort to the political class and hold responsible people that we should celebrate.
Okay, we have just less than 2 minutes to about 3-4 minutes, I think, if I'm correct. Yes, Victor, you want to bring in Faith?
Yeah,
She's smiling.
I think she agrees with everyone with all of this.
Yes, to a large extent. The reason for this is because you find that people who are party agents of political parties are not even members of that political party. So as an observer, you get to the field and you see people wearing tags of political party. They say they are party agents. Meanwhile, they are in cahoots with other party agents, especially if there's a dominant political party in that area. They are sharing money, they are exchanging,
They could even sponsor.
Yes, that's what they do. That's what
agent.
really happens. So you have a party agent who is supposed to be party agent for party A, who is working with the party B as real undercover party agent for that. So that's what you see. We need to get the political class, and that's why I'm always talking about the political class getting it right. If the political class can get committed members of their political parties to be party agents at the polling unit, a lot of these issues we are seeing that comes out would really be addressed there. So you have another situation whereby citizens, okay, you have that citizens result sheet that is put there. That is not ECCCE. That is not the original result sheet. The result sheet that is given to your party agent, that is given to the police, that is kept also by INEC, is what you should use as a collation for you. And I keep saying political parties should actually have their own situation rooms at polling unit, at ward level, at local government level, at state level, before it even comes to national. So when you are having all of these things, we will be able to do that. And that's why the media really comes in here. We need to understand what the processes are. There are processes that you need to follow before results are declared. So if you don't get votes at the polling unit, if you don't have party agents that are dedicated, political parties pay party agents to be there. They just go search for anybody during election, and as soon as election is over, the person is not committed to the political party. But if we have that re-education, reorientation, to say that party agents should be members of a political party, committed to your political party, so that when you go out there, you don't sell out. I have been on the field and I see where a party agent is wearing a particular party agent tag for a particular party, but is giving accreditation to another party where they sell votes and say this is the person. As soon you see somebody wearing, let's say you wear one party, maybe one political party, and he's the one that is writing the names of people who is voting for another political party so that they can go and pay.
Okay, let's quickly again round off on this issue, on the demographic impact. And we know that right now we're having more youth, but by the next election we'll probably be having more youth and gender, generation. What impact do you think that might likely have on the electoral, act and the electoral process?
A huge one and a very positive one. But the challenge is that even though you have a lot of young persons and women participating in the electoral process, the outcome of that does not reflect that participation. So until we're able to, that again comes to the political parties, because candidates are sponsored by political parties. If political parties don't sponsor young persons and women, then we are not able to have them.
That also speaks to the issue of independent candidacy.
Yes.
You want to speak in 60 seconds?
It's about expansion of the democratic space. The independent candidacy is important so that people who don't want to be aligned to a political party can test their popularity among them.
Especially when ideologies don't align.
Yes, but all of that, the one that we have now, let us make it work for young people. You asked about whether a demographics will have impact in it's quality youth, quality women participation, not just women participation.
All right.
Quality women participation, quality youth participation.
Okay, Ezewan Wago, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reform and convener, Say No Campaign Nigeria. We thank you very much for your time and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
And let me also thank Faith Nwadishi, who is Executive Director, Center for Okay, that's Good Morning Nigeria. Today we thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow is another day. I'll be here. Claire?
All right, and it's goodbye from me.
My name is Victor Azubai for now.